It's August in Brussels. And here's the annoying thing about this time of year. You finally have time to fit in some errands or have a long, leisurely lunch with that in-the-know contact you've been meaning to catch up with all year. But everything is closed and no one is around. So what there is time for is a good book. Whether you're holding down the fort in Brussels like me or escaping for vacation like that elusive source of mine, you know who you are. I'm Sarah Wheaton, host of the Brussels Playbook Weekender. This week, in what's becoming a new annual tradition, we're bringing you book recommendations from around the newsroom and from some of you, our listeners. We cover a bunch of different genres, from true crime thrillers to meaty deep dives into the world of politics, so that your summer holiday is covered. But this episode is not just a book chat. We also tackle the rise of populism and crises facing liberal democracies around the world. That's the topic of a new book by a very familiar figure around here, Guy Verhofstadt. He's, of course, the former Prime Minister of Belgium who also served as a member of the European Parliament from 2009 until 2024. He was a major advocate for the EU in the midst of the Brexit fight. And now he's just published a treatise entitled Defeating Trumpism. It's a self-diagnosis from one of Europe's most passionate centrists about the failures of his movement. And here's the thing. He told us he thinks writing a book like this will give him more influence than serving in the European Parliament. Yikes. So stay tuned for that discussion. But first, let's start with some book recommendations. To discuss the responses we got from colleagues and listeners, I'm joined by one of our producers, Saga Ringmar. Hey, Saga. Good to have you on this side of the microphone.
Hey, Sarah. It's definitely new, but I'm excited to share some of the books that we've gotten from around the newsroom. I mean, truly, might not be a surprise to anyone, but this is a place with a lot of book nerds. So, suffice to say, we have a lot to get through. Which ones caught your eye?
Well, I mean, the first one that stood out to me was Gabriel Gavin. He's a Brussels Playbook co-author and one of our diplomatic reporters here in Brussels, but he's lived all over Europe, especially Eastern Europe.
The Peasants by Vladislav Remont. Poland's answer to Middlemarch, this 1904 epic novel, follows an entire village through a year from autumn to summer at a time of occupation and uncertainty for the country. It's a book, though, that contains a whole universe within it, the passions, woes, gossip and intrigue of the people who live there. And at almost 1,000 pages, it can double as a makeshift picnic table for the beach. Although it's a polarizing book when it comes to Poland's national literary canon, and many of the Poles I've spoken to in Brussels say that they resented reading it at school. So maybe it's a question of not being forced to do it.
1,000 pages is pretty hefty, but I suppose if people have a really long vacation, they'll be able to get through that.
Yeah, I mean, we should know that regular Brussels Playbook podcast contributor Ian Wishart is Gabriel's editor, and so can just help you feel a little sympathetic for Ian that Gabriel recommended a 1,000-page book. I think that kind of captures the vibe of working with Gabriel.
It really does. Another one was from our Paris-based chief Europe correspondent, Marion Soletti. Let's have a listen to those.
Hi, I am Marion Soletti, Politico's Paris-based Chief Europe correspondent, sharing two of my all-time favorite reads. The first is The Postcard by Anne Berest. It follows a simple but riveting plot. After World War II, Berest's mother received an unsigned postcard with the names of her family members who got deported during the Holocaust. Berest initially believes this is a sort of dark prank and she wants to understand who sent it, so she dives into family history. The book is deeply moving because it makes you understand how people at the time lived through events they didn't fully understand. But it is also a real page-turner with an incredible plot twist. My second recommendation is much less known but is a read I will never forget. It's called No Place to Lay One's Head by Françoise Frankel, and it's a first-person account of her escape from Germany and then France to flee wartime persecution. She isn't a public person, and the book is pretty much the only thing we know about her, but it is worth 1,000,000 history books.
I mean, I know we speak a lot about beach reads as being something that has to be very light and easy, but to be honest, sometimes I find the daily routine can be so much that actually I have the most mental headspace for something a bit heavier, like these books, on vacation.
Yeah, I mean, I just came back from a summer vacation that included a trip to Auschwitz. So that's the vibe we got going on here. It helps you get good perspective on how good we have it right now.
Definitely.
We have another one from France and also a regular voice on this podcast, Clea Calcutt, our senior correspondent.
I would like to recommend The Wager. It's a non-fiction book by David Gran, and it's a fascinating page-turner about a shipwreck of an 18th century vessel and how, and I'm not revealing anything, certain people survive. And the book delves into the recollections of the sailors, and it's just an incredible story of survival and treason and betrayal. Really, really good one.
And another very familiar voice. We could not do this without including Zoya's recommendation.
Hey there, I'm Zoya Sheftalovich. I'm the host of the Brussels Playbook podcast. And my book recommendation is The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. It's a classic novel written in 1989, and it's about basically one man's love of stonemasonry and architecture and building cathedrals before modern technology existed. Sounds kind of weird, but it's epic. It's really super, super beautiful and well written, and I really recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah, I was reading more about this book, and apparently it's set in 12th century England and is about a master builder's dream of constructing a magnificent Gothic cathedral. And apparently it intertwines betrayal, revenge, and forbidden love. So, I mean, if that doesn't get you intrigued, I don't know what will.
And then I love this next recommendation because it's from arguably our most philosophical reporter, Brussels Playbook author Gerardo Fortuna.
So we all look forward to holidays because they give us a break from the constant chatter in our heads. We're always thinking or worrying or planning. And this book, The Practice of Not Thinking by this former Buddhist monk, Koike Ryunosuke, basically reminds us we don't have to wait for a holiday to feel present and to pay attention to what's really happening around us every day instead of living only in our thoughts.
I mean, listen, I think there's a lot of people in this newsroom who could benefit from not being so in their thoughts.
A lot of people in this town, in our listenership, definitely.
True.
Okay, so for our next one, though, we're going to go from Zen to a man-eating bear. And we'll do that with Anne McElvoy, a regular contributor to this podcast.
It's Anne McElvoy. I am checking in for book duty. So far, I have been reading Oana Aristide's novel Astronaut, set in her native Romania in the Ceausescu years. Best plot you're going to hear all summer. A detective in pursuit of a man-eating bear who gets interrupted by a rebellious schoolgirl who gets drawn into it. The backdrop is that era, Ceausescu, lots of spies in pursuit of both of them, blackouts, gas lamps, the rest. It's fantastically evocative, picaresque, extremely funny. I loved every word of it so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the wild chase ends.
I mean, Sarah, you had me at man-eating bear. We also received some recommendations from across the pond in the US. We've produced a video with some of those, but of the videos that we received, the one that caught our attention the most was this one from Megan Meserly. She's a Politico Playbook contributor and senior White House reporter. And it's Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver.
The book I would most recommend to understand American politics, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Kingsolver sets this retelling of David Copperfield in modern day Appalachia. Throughout the book, there's a lot of tales of the opioid crisis, of a changing economy, along with the decline of coal. It really, I think, just speaks to a lot of the factors that really contributed to the rise of Trumpism and are driving a lot of the populist sentiment that we see in America today, both on the right and the left. It really paints a picture of a working class that feels like they have been left behind. And these are exactly the kind of voters that both Republicans and Democrats are trying to speak to now, and whose votes they're going to be trying to earn heading into the 2028 presidential election, which will shape the future of America.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that we recommended this one because I kind of started reading it, visiting my mother in Florida a few years ago. It's not an easy read, but Barbara Kingsolver is great, and I love the scene change from this Dickens classic. So it's inspiring me to get back into that book. All right, we also got quite a few recommendations from listeners, although they tended to be a little shyer and just sent written recommendations as opposed to audio. So one that I'd like to read out is Elizabeth from Greece. She recommends The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. She said it's an excellent and relaxing read about old age and the youth that shaped it. It's an epistolary novel, so it follows the letters and emails of a 70-year-old retired lawyer and chief clerk sent to friends and family. And so in these correspondences, she examines her life and reflects on painful things from her past. It won the Women's Prize for Fiction.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of buzz around this book, so definitely that's going onto my list.
Another listener who has been a guest on this podcast several times, Frank Ferretti, the executive director of MCC Brussels, a prolific reader. One of several recommendations he sent is called My Stupid Intentions. That's by Bernardo Zanoni. As Frank writes, it's the debut novel from a young Italian writer that explores what makes animals animals and what makes us human. It's a funny, brutal, and tragic short work that uses anthropomorphism to challenge anthropomorphism. It's one of the cleverest and most memorable works I've read.
Another book recommendation we got from a listener was Dan from Sweden. And I'm not just choosing this because he's Swedish, I swear.
Sure.
And he recommends a book called Butter by Asako Yuzuki. So apparently this book is inspired by a real serial murder case that took place in Japan. It's about a relationship between a journalist and a female serial killer who, get this, is a chef who's accused of seducing men with her cooking and then poisoning them. Dan writes, I just read Butter by Asako Yuzuki and I thought it was really good. A mix of true crime, gastronomy, and navigating the complex social landscape in Japan. I mean, what more do you want in a book?
Well, and now, I mean, it's not just the Swedish connection. We should note Saga's partner is a chef. So
True. It's the combo.
We did have some listeners who were actually brave enough to send us their voice note.
Yes. So David Gear, he's a retired EU diplomat and also a longtime listener of our show. He recommended What We Can Know by Ian McEwan. Let's have a listen.
How will future generations judge us? Will they admire our technical prowess and our inventiveness? Or will they condemn us for our greed, selfishness, and the irresponsibility that left a terrible legacy of a flooded, cold, diminished world? Set in 2119, Ian McEwan's 18th novel, What We Can Know, asks exactly these questions. At the same time, it's a page-turner, a literary detective, and, in true McEwan style, a piercing dissection of the human heart.
And this is actually a book that our beloved supervising producer, Dionys, has been raving about for ages. Dionys, you're off on vacation right now, but we know you're most likely listening to this. We promise we'll read this book.
And my favorite Ian McEwan is On Pebble Beach, but despite the name, not the most fun beach read. So, and we'll do one more from Politico Tower. This one more of a sci-fi option from Gavin Sunwall, our executive director for communications here at Politico.
My summer book recommendation is Termination Shock by Neil Stephenson. Can the Queen of the Netherlands get laid and save the planet in the process? Taking place in the not-too-distant future, to me this page-turner is the most thoughtful and fun climate change novel out there. Set on a global stage that covers everything from fast food culture in the U.S. to AI enhancements for humans to virtual fan sites for stick fighting between the Indians and Chinese on the line of actual control, the reaffirming humanity at its core gives hope that we can find a way forward.
Okay, well, if you're one of those people who wants to read everything all the time, then you're probably actually feeling more stressed out from hearing this list rather than relaxed, but we hope that we've given you some good inspiration and ideas. And with that, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dive straight into my conversation with former MEP, Prime Minister, and now author Guy Verhofstadt. Don't go anywhere. We would normally start off by plugging the title of your book, but yours appears under two very different titles. So in Dutch, it's translated as The Citizen in Revolt, and in English, it's Defeating Trumpism. Why such different titles, and what is the revolt really against?
I thought it would be better to sell in the US with the title as Defeating Trumpism. because, it's mainly a book about defeating populism. I would say that Trumpism is the main populist trend that we have seen the last 10 years in politics, and it has influenced certainly populism in Europe. So I found defeating Trumpism a good title in the US to talk about an alternative way to beat populism. That's the reason.
And so, in the Dutch title, The Citizen in Revolt, what is that revolt against?
Well, the revolt of the citizens is against a political system that, in their eyes, doesn't deliver anymore, not economically, because we see huge inequality in society. Secondly, not politically, because people believe that they have nothing to say in politics. They see only rulers and those who are ruled, and they complain about the rulers, whatever the rulers are. And thirdly, there is certainly also a question of identity, migration, that I mostly define as a problem of religious fragmentation in our societies. And these three reasons make that people are very, very, very negative towards the political system. So in Europe, but also in the US, what we see is that the satisfaction of the citizens with their political system is between 3 and 5 on a scale of 0 to 10. That's a disaster. So in Belgium is 3, in France is 3. The best is Sweden with 5 or something like that, on a scale from 0 to 10. So that means that the citizens are really dissatisfied with their political system, even when our democratic system is a system that can renew itself, that can rejuvenate itself every 4 years, because you can vote everybody out. And even in such a system, people are so dissatisfied. So the reason for that, I try to describe in the book, is that there is no longer in the center of the political landscape an ideology, a vision anymore. It's all pragmatism, realpolitik, and people don't see any direction anymore in politics. All political leaders just give a direction to the future, a direction for the age to come. And the consequence of this is that politics has become an empty bulle, an empty space that fills itself with all kinds of discontent, criticism, hate, fear, conspiracy. What is the basis for populism? So it is in fact what I describe in the book, that the rise of populism is because of a supply side crisis in traditional politics.
Well, I mean, you yourself seem pretty dissatisfied with the political system, and that's after being part of it for basically your whole life. You know, you left the European Parliament 2 years ago. You said that you had been obsessed with politics since the age of 12 or 13 in the book. But then you told one Belgian outlet that you felt that writing this book would be more influential or more important than serving another 5 years as an MEP. That's a pretty grim statement about the European Parliament.
Yeah, I think that the European Parliament has lost a lot of influence in European politics. There is no really a spirit to fight for Europe and more European integration. It's simply following the wishes of the member states, of the European Council. That's also the case for the European Commission, but even more for the European Parliament. So my conclusion was, what I'm doing here, I give maybe interesting speeches in the plenary and so on. But what does it change, in fact? Nothing at all, because this parliament is not ready to fight for more power, more competences, more integrated European Union, and to pick up a fight with the member states to achieve that. So I thought, maybe writing a book is better.
You argue that liberalism in its current form has reached an end and needs to be rebuilt from scratch. But, you weren't simply an observer of that political experiment. You were one of the people running it. So what do you think maybe you got wrong?
Yeah, I think that what went wrong is with our generation of liberal leaders was that we thought after the fall of the Soviet Union and the end of the Berlin Wall in 1989, we thought that, okay, we won the battle. We won the battle against socialism, collectivism, communism, and it was clear for us in the 90s of the previous century that every country would come to a system, a mix of free market economy and liberal democracy. And so we were complacent. We didn't think that it was necessary to fight for it. It would happen automatically, spontaneously. And also in our own societies, in our own democratic societies, what we saw was an end of the ideological battle with the third way of Tony Blair and Gerhard Schröder, who said, we were in fact as liberal as we were. There was no difference between them and us anymore. So we all in the West, in the democratic West, became complacent. Everything would go fine. There was no need to fight anymore for liberal and democratic values. And then came the Arab Spring. That was one of the first signs that it was not happening in that sense. And then a return, first in Georgia, later in Ukraine, of an aggressive Russia. Then what happened in Hong Kong is maybe the biggest disaster, because that was a democracy, a modern democracy that has been given for free, for nothing, I would say, to an autocratic Chinese Communist Party. So I think this crisis of liberal democracy is a crisis of our own making, yeah?
Yeah, it's quite a bit of responsibility that you take on behalf of liberal politicians, but you also point to, populists who exploit public anger and tech elites who accumulate power.
Well, what populism is doing is not giving a view or an idea of the future. They are bidding on revenge, on anger, on fear, on discontent, on what I call also in the book, the feeling that everything is declining and that the children will have it worse than the parents in the future. That is what they are doing. You see that with Trump, you see that with Farage in the UK. And it's not that a democratic candidate cannot win anymore against these illiberal or populist leaders. But the fight is then about democracy, not longer about the direction of society. It's a battle where both sides, populists and Democrats, are putting fear into the public opinion, fear for the other. So that makes it a fairly fertile ground for populism to continue to grow, because there is no ideological benchmarks anymore in such a battle. It's not longer about what is the direction that all societies has to go to solve our problems. Inequality, lack of participation in the political system, and so on. Populists are very good in that, in spreading fear. And we are very bad in doing the opposite. So what the book is saying is that we have to return to an ideological approach of politics. Because what people expect from politicians is not only to solve a concrete problem, building a bridge, building a new railway or whatever, a new regulation. It's also giving hope for the future, creating a direction for society. And that is what we didn't do the last 2-3 decades. And we have to return to that. And what the third part of the book is trying to do is to give a first attempt, description of what such a new ideology could be, what I call in the book Citizenism. So it's a little bit a difficult terminology, Citizenism, in which the citizens is always the center of the action and the center of the political challenge. So economically, how to tackle this increasing inequality. And my proposal is then democratize capital, because if you don't democratize capital, then you will always lose, because nobody becomes rich with a salary. Sorry, that's not longer the case.
Well, yeah, I want to dig in deeper to that. And you make a really interesting argument, because I think we hear a lot of people saying that actually politics has become too ideological and governments are not solving people's basic problems. But you are actually arguing that we need a new ideology. And you have a lot of pretty serious ideas about how to deal with that income inequality. You talk about universal basic income, housing vouchers, even rewriting the tax system to reward AI that makes humans more productive and punish AI that takes humans' jobs. But the thing is, the current polarization that we've been discussing has also paralyzed governments. And so it's hard to see how they can actually implement anything ambitious, including this new ideology that you describe. How do we get out of this trap?
Well, when you launch a new ideology, it's possible to gain traction about that and to create a political party around that. So that's the way. That's the old-fashioned way, I would say, to do politics. That's to show to the people, to explain to the people how a new ideology could solve their problems far better than to give in or to accept the revenge strategy of populist leaders. So that's the way to do it. What we need is a new generation of politicians who make more or less the same analysis that I try to do in the book, and then to come forward with bold proposals that seems utopian, but are not utopian at all. Take, for example, democratization of capital. So the idea is that instead of companies pay their taxes to the state, I would propose that they give shares to their working people. Instead of giving for free their data to Zuckerberg and Musk, I propose that data are monetized. Because it's their data, it's their ownership. Because the modern economy will fully be based on data, and again data. So that is the new oil. So I want this new oil be democratized so that the people have a part in it. The same in democracy. I want to give people a direct say, a direct influence, because we are still in a representative democracy, and we think that's the nec plus ultra of democracy. And that's not true. The revolutionary leaders in France and in America in the 18th century wanted to give a direct voice to their citizens. That was technically not possible, maybe in the 18th century, but that's possible today in the 21st century. So this new ideology tries to really give a new start to society. The book proposes, for example, to break up the monopolies in the digital world. We need to go to the source of the problem, and that's to democratize capital, to popularize capital in a totally different way. So we need a fundamental shift in the way we look to our societies. Otherwise, the discontent will only increase. Why? Because the system as it works today is killing social mobility. I mean with that, people cannot become rich anymore with a salary, and it's impossible today when you are living in poverty or you are a middle-class worker to raise to the upper 10% of the income distribution. That's impossible. That has become impossible.
Are there any political figures that you see now who would be capable of leading such a new ideology or political movement?
No, because it is a new generation. It has to come from a new generation. It has to come from people who are now in the 20s who come forward with these ideas. And that's the reason also that I thought, okay, I'm writing this book because that seems to me a better way to speak to this younger generation than to continue what I did in the past.
You do at the same time also say that Europe should become, a real power, even an empire.
An empire of the good, not an empire of the bad.
So what would this look like, and how can it be actually democratic, and how can it catch up with the US and China?
For the moment, we cannot compete with not the US and not with China, and tomorrow not with India and other, because we are still a bunch of countries based on the unanimity voting rule, not capable to react immediately to the ever-changing world. So my plea in the book is to have more European integration and to become a real federation. And if it is not possible to do it with everybody, 27, let's do it with 10, 12, 15 countries who want to go forward. That idea is gaining ground now for the moment, very, very, very slowly. And the first field where we need to apply that is in defense, naturally. Defense is a disaster in Europe because it's not that we spend not enough. Together with UK, if you add also Ukraine to it, we have more or less $500 billion military expenditures in Europe. That's 3 times more than the Russians. That's 50% of the Americans, but we can only do 10 or 15% of the operations of the American army. The reason is very simple. It's duplication in Europe. And it's not by increasing, I'm not against it, the military expenditures to 2% or 2.5 or 3% that you will solve the problem. You need to solve the duplication. You cannot have security in Europe when you have 130 different weapon systems, where the US have 25 weapon systems. Chinese the same, 25 weapon systems. We have 130. Now everybody is talking about we need a better defense, missile, and every country is developing its own system. So that's not the way to do it. So a European Defence Union will be one of the key elements, I think, in this next phase of European integration. And I'm pretty sure that if we got this European Defence Union already in place, there would have been no war in Ukraine, because there would be a very serious, capable instrument of deterioration present in Europe, but it's not the case today.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Guy Verhofstadt, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, that's almost it from us this week. Good journalists that we are, we focused on what everyone else thinks. So now we're going to indulge ourselves and share our tips. Saga, what have you got?
So my recommendation is actually sort of cheating because it's a trilogy, so it's 3 books. It's the Harlem Trilogy by Colson Whitehead, if you've heard of this. Colson Whitehead, the first book of his that I read was The Nickel Boys. So that's a harrowing book about a brutal reformatory school for Black boys in Jim Crow era America. But this series, I promise, is a lot lighter. So it's about New York. It spans from the 1950s to the 1980s. Follows Ray Carney, who's a furniture salesman. He's trying to live a decent life, but the gritty criminal underworld of Harlem keeps pulling him back in. It's about con men, stolen jewelry, mob bosses, corrupt cops. It's really a page turner. The latest installment in the series, Cool Machine, has come out this July. So I've bought that and I'm ready to consume it.
Nice. Well, I have 2 recommendations that both have kind of heavy sounding names, but they're actually pretty light reads. So one actually also came care of Dianis, our supervising producer. One is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. It's by Olga Tokarczuk. If Dianis were here, I'm sure he would have corrected my pronunciation, but he's already on vacation. But of course, she is a Nobel Prize winner, so you should be able to find her pretty easily online. It's set on the Polish-Czech border. It's a crime thriller that also considers issues like animal rights and the way we see or don't see different people. The other one is an oldie but goodie. It's Shame by Salman Rushdie. It's a satire about sort of the founding and early years of Pakistan. It's very political, but it's very funny. And we talk on this podcast and in Brussels about your English, but he writes in this really interesting way that sort of captures subcontinent English. And I just found it exhilarating just to absorb the language. So those are my recs.
Interesting.
Thank you for sharing your Saga. Thanks to all our listeners and colleagues who shared theirs. And with that, we are done for this week and for the summer. We're taking a 2-week break, so for the next 2 Fridays, you'll see some reissues of some of our favorite episodes in your feed. Then the daily Brussels Playbook podcast will be back on the 24th of August, and The Weekender will be back with a new show on August 28th. If you have any questions or comments, send us a voice note or a message on WhatsApp. You'll find the details in our show notes. You can also always write to us at podcast@politico.eu. And if you haven't already, please rate and review the show. The Weekender lives on the Brussels Playbook podcast feed, so subscribing there really helps. Thanks to audio producer Saga Ringmar and to Dianis Sturis, our supervising audio producer. I'm Sarah Wheaton. Have a great summer.